happening at the West County Mosque this past weekend, and they said I couldn't perform it because it was too political. Whoops. So this is going to be my first time performing it at all. Bear in mind that is intended for a more religious community because I wrote it for them, right? So it might end on like a more religious note or something. Just be aware. All right, and I call it a living while Muslim. Have you heard people talk about cancer? Well, sir, the rhetoric goes that if you smoke one cigarette, you'll be fine, but start a habit and you can develop an ulcer that starts up benign, confined to a small part of your lungs, but then it slowly grows till you have to resign to a life where your health is always in decline. That's the fear America has of us, of Muslims and people of color. You see, America has a unique foundation we call the First Amendment, giving freedom of religion to all, but with a strange penchant to give a man who's black a 20% longer sentence. A man becomes the president, not despite, but because he spreads resentment. So even if you're a resident, if your skin's a darker pigment, your innocence is irrelevant. When the police start acting arrogant, then things can get malevolent, officers trying to make themselves feel relevant, but what if they aren't even hesitant to gun down a black man with no evidence? Is violence now so prevalent that we start to become negligent, that the way a man protests is more important than why he's doing it? Race is in the room and it's an elephant. So if you pride yourself in being intelligent, then why are you so scared of talking about race like it's the Revenant? Is it that you'll say the wrong thing? Man, just have some respect. Because you see, the acceptable rhetoric in this nation is left scarily unchecked, with both white and colored people feeling disrespect. So these victims of neglect, of course, want to project, and in effect, you get a shooter or a protest. The Dylan Roofs, Adam Lanz's, Nathan Desai's, are they even killers in the media's eyes because of their lighter skin color, and the stories revised, and an Islamophobic franchise that makes an entire ethnicity demonized? Land of the free, but we're still colonized. You never needed chains for an innocent man to be criminalized. When hate speech towards a minority becomes so normalized, then how long is it before we realize we're being fed real lies to justify violence and people who die? In Nazi Germany, the Jews were vilified, called a plague to society, and so stigmatized that people who were neighbors now looked at them with fiery eyes, fantasizing that their harm to society could be recognized, justifying that they should be further scrutinized, further and further marginalized, till a government considered civilized authorized the killing of 6 million lives, and the citizens didn't even recognize. So when you hear the stories of minorities being misread, portrayed as violent protesters full of disrespect, then know that a black child walks back from work with his hands behind his head, and when you ask him why, he says so that cops don't shoot me dead, because if I reach for my pocket, he'll think it's a gun instead of my meds. But the real question is, what stories are they being fed to teach a child to fear getting home to his bed? And how far has ignorance spread to have the noble job of police infected with innocent blood in its stead? Does this institution that we fund turn grown men into cowards with guns? What happened to using the stun? It's almost as if they shoot us for fun, and you can make an excuse if it only happened once, but when it happens a ton, you have to be dumb to not notice that the police stories are spun to give paid leave to someone instead of firing some. And now black men feel that to be safe, they have to run. Hands up, don't shoot, but we have become numb to the realities of minorities. If they live in the slum, we need solidarity in this society before we succumb to this culture of not caring about issues that don't affect you directly. Just watch yourself act so discreet. When you pass by the beggar on the street, you act all elite and hide your receipt because she's just a bum and a freak. Sure, she may be weak, not even have socks for her feet. Looks like life defeated her, but even though she's needy, at least she's not greedy. When her children are asleep, she's filling out her timesheet. So when you call her an addict, then who's the real repeat offender? When you don't befriend her or spend on her, then who's the real pretender? We claim that to God we surrender, but do we really if our hearts aren't tender? Compared with her, we all live in splendor. But what does that say about us if we don't help her get through the winter? With all this madness on both sides, the Christian wonders, what would Jesus do? And when we ask ourselves the same question, we say that he'd follow our beloved prophet, who'd rather support minorities than huge companies making a profit. He'd be inclusive of all people, no matter how ratchet. When you'd be with him, you'd hear his voice soften, and then you'd know that he was honest. Even enough that even his enemies use him as a bank deposit, someone who could take care of your wallet without lining his pockets. Known throughout town as the trustworthy because he never broke a promise, but even through all that he stayed modest, a product that everyone wanted. So when he began to preach, that's how Islam spread like a hot topic, like a product that everyone wanted, or really, really hated, kind of like today. If all's fair in love and war, then random security checks at the airport gain a lot of support. Called out for a bomb threat you never even heard about before, but obviously there could be one in your box of cookies from the air grocery store. How long will it be before harsher measures are called for? When they call us homegrown terrorists and an eyesore, it's not long before we get in an uproar about hate crimes increasing more and more. In Sacramento, a brown child shot in his own garage floor. Hussein al-Nahdi beaten, dead, and his face torn. We feel so scared, so worn out. But the stories we hear in the Quran are not simply lore. When Moses spoke with Pharaoh, they went straight to war. A tyrant versus a minority will have injustice galore. But when God's on your side, you're hard to ignore. Who's going to care about this election on the day of resurrection, when the collection of Muslims will be asked if they showed people the right direction? You can try to say objection. Donald Trump rid Muslims of our basic protections, but we're not the first ones. Remember when the companions of the Prophet were tortured in oppression? Bilal, the black slave, with rocks burning holes into his skins, giving him infections. The parents of Mus'ab kicking him out with dispossession. The strongest people on earth were so pushed that they questioned, Mata Nasrullah, where's the help of Allah? They faced a kind of societal rejection that would give anyone depression, but with God, their pain strengthened their connection with Islam, the Almighty, in achieving perfection and ultimately achieving eternal liberation. We've been through this before, and we'll get through this again, but if we want God to help us, we need to begin to start treating an orphan as if they are more than the circumstances life has put them in. We need to, for God's sake, become more outspoken about our fellow Hispanic, queer, and Black Americans. To side with justice, we must repeat their slogans. Black Lives Matter. Do you think I'm joking? Yesterday, Eric Garner for being black. Today, Isra Al-Tun for her hijab is choking. If we don't fight for each other, then this hate will keep flowing. If we're quiet because we don't care, our fears will remain unspoken. If we stand by doing nothing, we'll continue to fall for anything. And the Quran says, "O you who believe, stand up for justice." So for God's sake, get moving. And if our situation gets grim, know that we can always put our trust in Him so that if we're broke, we will never be broken.